Hey everybody, welcome back to those of you that have been following my channel already, and a huge welcome to anyone who may be here for the first time. With Labor Day this week, at least in the United States, it's kind of the unofficial end of summer. So we are just ready to jump into the fall season, and of course that means spooky season and Halloween. So today I've got these fun tug and pull pumpkins to share with you. Not only are they just super cute, they're adorable just looking at, just to sit on a shelf and look at, but they're also a fun fidget toy. You can pull their arms and legs and make them longer and shorter, and my kids just love playing with these. And at every market that I've been to, the kids just don't want to put them down because they're so much fun to sit and play with. There's a lot of different options with these as far as colors, different yarns. This one is made with Bernat blanket yarn. This one is the new Demi Pearl Loops and Threads Demi Pearl from Michaels. It's a little bit bigger, but not too much bigger. You can do these great big sparkly eyes, which I think are super cute, but even just these smaller plain black ones work as well. So let's go ahead and get started. For this tutorial, you're going to need some plush yarn. I like to use Bernat blanket yarn because it's pretty sturdy and doesn't break easily. If you have one that breaks easily or one that sheds a lot, falls apart easily, it's just not going to hold up as well. Both for the arms and legs that you play with here, they'll start to come apart as you're playing with them. And then also on this one where we're making these lines on the pumpkin, you have to pull those pretty tight. And if you don't have a pretty sturdy yarn, it's really likely to snap when you're doing that. Another option that you can do here is if you have just a worsted weight yarn that's in a similar color, you can do those lines with that if you're worried about it snapping, but you do need one that will hold up well to the playing here. So I've got the Bernat blanket yarn. I'm going to be using a size 6mm crochet hook, and that will depend on your personal crochet tension and the type of yarn that you're using. A couple of stitch markers are helpful. Scissors, of course. I need just a little bit of black worsted weight yarn to make his smile. If you've watched any of my other tug and pull creatures, you know that the tutorials for those, you know that I use this glue to hide the ends on their arms and legs. And you only need just a tiny little drop, but it's just because they are played with so much and there's not really a lot in the hand or the arm that you can hide ends in. And if you try to weave those ends in, they tend to pop out. So I hide those with the glue so they stay in there. I'm using two different type of needles in this tutorial. I like the bent one here for sewing on the stem because after you shape the pumpkin, it's kind of indented down here, and it makes it just a little bit easier to have that bent one to go down in and underneath as you're sewing the stem on, but it's not necessary. If you don't have a bent needle, you can definitely do it without. I've got these safety eyes that I'm using. These ones are 25mm, but you can also choose what kind you want there. I've done this one with just the plain black ones and added a little bit of white detail, so he turns out cute with those ones as well. And finally, I have a couple of little pieces of felt. They're about, I don't know, 1 inch by 3 inches or so. It doesn't have to be a matching color because it's not going to show. Mine just happens to be orange like the pumpkin. And I'm going to use some hot glue to put those on. And what I use those for is inside here, I actually glue them over the spot where the arms and legs are so that the stuffing does not pull out when you're playing with him like this. Now, in some of my other ones I've done, I've used like a piece of nylon or some kind of other little pouch to enclose the stuffing inside. But because you sew through the middle of this pumpkin multiple times, that method just doesn't work quite as well here. So that's all that we need here, and we're ready to jump right in. We're going to start by making these arm and leg pieces. We need 2 of them with a foot on one end and a hand on the other. So I have my green here, and I have already measured out about 30 inches and tied a slip knot here to start. So I've got this 30-inch long tail, and then this coming up here to the top is my working yarn. And if you've seen my other tug and pull tutorials, you will recognize this method that I'm going to use. It is the same crochet long tail foundation base chain that I really like to use for these, but if you haven't seen them, I will go ahead and explain it here. So we've got the slip knot on our knot. We're going to take our cut tail, the one that we started with the 30 inches, we're going to wrap it up and over the crochet hook like this from the front to the back. and then we are going to yarn over with the working yarn. Also, it's like wrapping the yarn from the back to the front here, and then pull through 2 loops, and that is one of those stitches. So I will go ahead and show you that again. I think this is your long cut tail. You take it and you wrap it up and over the hook from the front to the back, and then you take this other one, wrap it from the back to the front, which is a yarn over, and pull through 2 loops. So now we have 2 of those. I'm going to do 1 more. This is how we start the foot. I have 3 of those stitches there. And if you look at it, it kind of looks like it's the top of a regular stitch, like a single crochet stitch on this side, and then you can turn it over and it's the top of a stitch on that side too. And we're going to work into both sides of that. It's a little bit trickier to see with the plush yarn here, but I've got those 3 stitches. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to turn back and go along this top edge so that my cut tail is coming out the bottom here. I have these 3 stitches. I'm going to slip stitch into the first one, and then I will slip stitch also into the second one. So now I've just got this one left on the end, and in that one on the end I'm going to do 4 half double crochets. So there's 1, 2, you yarn over, go through, pull up a loop, and then pull through all 3. That's 2, 3, 4, and now I'm on the other side here. I've got my long cut tail coming out at the end here, but I've got 2 stitches left, and I'm just going to slip stitch in both of them. There's 1 and 2. And that's basically the foot, and it tends to kind of be inside out when I start here, so I just go ahead and pop that up like that. That makes the front part of the foot. And that's the right side of your work. And I am up here back at the back of the hook, back of the foot, and I've got this long cut tail coming out right here. I am going to pull it forward like this so it's coming up out the top, and then I'll grab my working yarn here, and I have this little loop that's sticking out right here, which is from my chain 1, and I'm going to slip stitch through that. So I just grab my yarn and pull it through. So now I've got this working yarn coming out the top, and I'm going to I'll pull this loop out just a little bit, and I'll take my needle or my hook off of the yarn, and I'm going to insert it right here in front of where this cut tail is coming out, kind of in the middle of the back of the foot. And I'll grab that loop that I dropped and pull it up to the top here. And the reason that we want to do this is because we're wanting our stitches to make a right turn here and go straight up. So we have this foot. You've got the heel right here, and you want it to turn and go from the foot up to the leg. So that's why we pull the loop up right there. And now we're going to do some more of those long tail foundation base chains that we started with. So we've got our cut tail coming out this way, our working yarn coming up this way. I'm going to go yarn from the front to the back over the hook, this one from the back to the front over the hook, and pull it through. And we're going to do 25 of those. Okay, now I've got 25 of those stitches done, so that's my arm leg piece. I have my foot on one end and I need to make the hand on the other end. To do that, I'm just going to start by chaining 4, and then I will go back and I'm going to slip stitch in the back bump of that first chain, and then I will chain 3, slip stitch in that same spot again, And do that one more time, chain 3, and slip stitch again in that same spot. And there's our little hand with 3 fingers. Now I'm just going to cut this yarn. It doesn't have to be very long, just long enough to tie a knot basically. I'll pull that tight, and my other end is right here by it. So I am going to tie those together with a square knot and pull it pretty snug. Now in order to hide these ends, I mentioned earlier, there's just not a lot to really hide them in with the arm and the hand here to work them in a way that they will not pop out. So they're already pretty secure as far as the whole piece coming undone because of the knots that I've tied. But I'm just going to weave them in a couple stitches down, and then we'll use our glue to make sure the ends don't pop out. So I just go down a very short distance here and weave it in like that. Now I'll get the other one. Come out in a different spot than you did the first one, but just a couple stitches down is enough. Pull that down. Now after I've weaved them in like this and they're coming out the sides, I like to kind of pull on it a little bit because this is going to be pulled on a lot as it's played with. I don't want these cinched up tight, or pulling on them will pull the glue loose. So I want to make sure they're not cinched up tight, and that's why I pull on that. So here's where I grab the glue. And like I said, we're just going to need a tiny little bit. And I take my scissors, and you can kind of look beforehand, this hole right here that your yarn is coming out of, that's where you're going to put the glue. But I cut this off really short there, right next to the hole. And then I just put a tiny little bit of glue in that hole, kind of underneath it. And I push this end down into that hole with the glue. And after you've pushed it down in there, you can kind of pinch it together a little bit, and your end is hidden and it will stay and not pop out when it's played with. And then I go ahead and do that with the other one also. And you want to make sure that you don't really play with this or pull on it too much before the glue is dry, because you want that to be nice and secure. Once you have both ends glued in, this is what it should look like, with a foot on one end and the hand on the other end, and you make 2 of those, then we'll move on to the main body of the pumpkin. Before you start the main part of the body, you're going to want to take your yarn and cut 2 pieces that are about 12 inches long each, of the same color that you are making the body out of, and I will show you later what we're going to use those for. For the main part of the pumpkin, we are going to start with a magic ring, and we will do 6 single crochets into that magic ring. For round 2, we are just going to increase all the way around, 6 increases, and we will have a total of 12 stitches after round 2. I like to put my stitch marker into the first stitch of each round. Round 3, make sure my magic ring is tight here. Round 3, we are going to do a pattern of single crochet and then an increase all the way around. We will have a total of 18 stitches at the end of this round. Now you might notice when you start with only 6 single crochets when you're doing plush yarn, sometimes it seems a little pointy at the end. It's not totally round. So normally I would start a rounded pattern with plush yarn with 8 single crochets, but on this one where it's going to be indented on the bottom like this, it really doesn't matter that it's going to be kind of pointy there, so I'm not worried about that, just in case you were. For round 4, we are going to continue to increase, so we will do 2 single crochets and an increase, and we will repeat that pattern 6 times around, and we will have 24 stitches at the end of this round. Round 5 is where we're going to start adding the legs in. But first we will do 3 single crochets and an increase. So there's 1, 2, 3, increase, and we're going to repeat that pattern again. 1, 2, 3, increase. So this round is really just like continuing to increase, where we do 3 single crochets and an increase all the way around, but we're going to replace a couple of the stitches with a hole for the leg. So that's what we're about to. So we just did 3 single crochet and an increase twice. Now we're going to do 3 more single crochet. And this next stitch is where we would normally put our next increase, but instead we're going to put a leg. So we're going to chain 1, and that takes the place of the stitch underneath it that we're stitching, or that we're skipping, sorry. And then we're going to take this leg piece and we're just going to set it right there next to our work. We've got that chain 1, we're going to go over the leg to do the next one. And because this chain 1 is taking the place of the first part of an increase, the second part of our increase is going to go in that stitch right underneath it. Now sometimes we skip a stitch when we're putting the leg in, but we are not skipping this one because it's the second half of an increase. Hopefully that makes sense there. So we do a single crochet there, which is like the second half of our increase, but the first half is that hole. Then we're going to single crochet 3, continuing the pattern of the single crochet 3 and increase around. And then this next stitch is where we would have an increase. So we're going to do the first half of the increase. We're going to do a single crochet as the first part of an increase. So it's like we just did 4 single crochets there. We're going to chain 1. That's like the second half of our increase. And we're going to place the leg right here. Then we're going to go over that. And we don't skip a stitch here again because where we put the leg was like the second would have gone in that same one for the second half of that increase. So right there, we're going to chain 3 and do an increase. And then we have that pattern one more time to finish off this round. 1, 2, 3, and an increase. So now we have our legs coming out through their holes there, and they can move up and down. For round 6, we are going to continue to increase still. So this time we're going to offset our increases a little bit. So we're going to start with 2 single crochets, and then we will do an increase. And now we're going to do 4 single crochets and an increase. and then repeat that pattern of 4 single crochets and an increase. A couple more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, increase. Okay, now I've gotten to where I put this first leg here, and instead of trying to crochet into that chain stitch that went over the leg, I'm just going to go all the way around it and kind of underneath it and go through that same hole that the leg is through for my next one. So 1, and this single crochet right after the leg hole sometimes is a little bit tight. It's a little bit easy to skip over it. Just make sure that you're not missing that one. It can be a little trickier to get into, but make sure you're not missing that one. Go into that one or you'll be short on your stitch count. So that was 2, 3, 4, and an increase. And do that pattern again. 1, and just like before, we're going to go under that chain through the same hole that our leg is through for that one. 2, make sure you don't miss that one right after the leg hole. 3, 4, and an increase. And we'll have that pattern one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, increase. And then we should just have 2 single crochets here to finish the round. Round 7, we are simply going to single crochet all the way around, and we will have a total of 36 stitches in this round. We are now on round 8, where we're going to have the arms come out again, but we're going to start by single crocheting 14. Okay, I've done 14 single crochets here, and that number could vary just a little bit depending on your crochet tension and the type of yarn you're using. You may need to move it one or two to the right or left to get it to line up how you want. But if you're looking at it from the side here, it should be a little bit before where your leg comes out. The arms are farther back. So I've done 14 single crochets, and I'm going to chain 1. I will pull up this arm, make sure they're not crossed. You want to make sure it's on the same side here as that leg. Put it in that little space here, and this time, because it's not part of an increase, I am going to skip this stitch underneath because this chain 1 is taking the place of that stitch right there, and then I'll go into the next one to continue around. And between the arms here on this round, I am going to have 13 stitches. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Okay, now as you look at it on this side, you want the arm to be coming out a little bit past where that leg comes out here. It's a little bit farther back. You can kind of gauge if it looks like this one is closer. You can do fewer stitches between, or you can move that one back a little bit if you want to. Again, I'm going to chain one here after those single crochets. I will place the arm right there, and I'm going to skip that one underneath because this chain one is taking the place of that one. And I'll go into the next one to continue just single crocheting around, and I should have 7 more to finish the round. And once you're done with this, you can kind of go back and look and see if they look like they're lined up pretty good. If you need to move them one way or the other, then you can adjust them on that round. But if not, we're going to continue with round 9. And for the next 5 rounds, we're actually just going to single crochet all the way around, and for 36 stitches on each round. And we'll do the same thing that we did on round 6 when we were going past where these arms and legs were. We just go around the chain stitch there through that same hole rather than working into the chain, and then make sure that you don't skip the one right after. So I'm going to go ahead and do 5 rounds around, and then I will come back and we'll continue on. Now that I've done those 5 rounds around, I am ready to stop and put my eyes in. And if you look right here, the line of where the arm is coming out, we're going to go up 1 line from that. And this is going to be between rounds 9 and 10 where we put the eyes. And the way that I like to place them is I look at where my arm is and I count 1, 2, 3 stitches over, and then I put it right next to that one. And that's about how I place it. So I come over here, look at where my arm is. I'm going up to the next round from the top of the arm. 1, 2, 3. And then when you put them in, at least with this size of eyes, there ends up being about 5 visible stitches between them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they are kind of just above the legs here. You can adjust that according to your own preference if you want, but that's how I like to place them. And if you remember the 12-inch pieces of yarn that we cut to start, that's where this is going to come in. Before you put the backs on your eyes, we're going to place this yarn underneath that eye, and we want it to be on the inside side of the post between the eyes here. And it's going to be a little bit longer on the bottom than on the top. The top just needs to be long enough to go up to the top. The bottom will need to go through the pumpkin and up to the top, so it'll be a little bit longer there. But you just put it next to the post there, like that, under the eye, and then when you clamp it down, it will be nice and secure in there to help make the lines on the pumpkin. Once you have your eyes clamped on, the back of them clamped on here, so your yarn is nice and secure here and your eyes are where you want them, we're actually going to turn the pumpkin inside out, and you can see where the arm and leg pieces come through here. You're going to want to pull them kind of tight so it's a little bit smaller than, see right there, it looks bigger until I pull it down in tight. You don't necessarily need it cinched together, but just tight down in there. And this is where my pieces of felt are going to come in. I'm going to take and put just a little bit of hot glue right along here, and I will glue it on either side. It doesn't matter which side you start on, but glue it on that side, and then lift this up, put a little bit of hot glue right along there, glue it down on that side. If you want to glue the ends, the shorter ends down here afterwards, you can. I don't think that's necessary, but the main thing is you want to just make sure that you don't get any hot glue on this piece. You want to make sure it's to the sides of it. If you use a little wider piece, that might make it easier to make sure you don't get any on there, because you want those to be able to move freely underneath the felt there. And that is just to keep the stuffing inside so that those arms don't grab the stuffing as you're pulling it and playing with it. Now that I have these felt pieces glued on here to cover up those arms, I'm going to turn them right side out. You can pull on these, make sure that they're not glued to anything and that it's still going to work properly. And we are ready to keep going. We're on round 14 now, and we are going to start decreasing again. So we're going to start with 2 single crochets. 1, 2, and then we will do an invisible decrease, so up through the front 2 loops of the next 2 stitches, pull through and through 2 loops again. And then we're going to do a pattern of 4 single crochets and a decrease, and we'll repeat that around until we get close to the end. So there was 4 and a decrease, and we'll do that again. And now we should just have, after this decrease, 2 stitches left to finish this round. 2 single crochets there, and we have 30 stitches. For round 15, we will do a pattern of 3 single crochets and a decrease, and repeat that all the way around. Okay, we are now down to 24 stitches around on that one. And for round 16, we're going to do a pattern of 2 single crochets and a decrease, and repeat that around. Before we move on to round 17, we're going to start stuffing our pumpkin here. And you want to stuff him kind of lightly. You're going to want him to be a little bit more squishy at this point than you want him when he's done, because we are going to be sewing through and squishing him down a little bit. It will be more firm once we've tightened down these lines, these extra strings that make the lines for the pumpkin. So do them stuff it kind of lightly, and then we will move on to round 17. We are just going to do a single crochet and then a decrease all the way around. We will end with 12 stitches on this round. And for our final round here, we will just do 6 decreases. Okay, he is a little bit taller than you might think he should look, because we are going to squish him down. But once we get to this point, we're ready to finish off the top, but we want to make sure we leave a longer yarn tail than what we normally would, because we need it. We're going to sew up through the middle of the pumpkin to make the lines here. So usually the way I decide how long to cut it is, I've already got these 2 here that are going to make those 2 lines, and so we've got 4 more. So I just take this and I pull it down to the bottom. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's about how long I cut it. And that should be plenty because of how tight we're gonna pull it when we make those lines. So you don't really need to add extra after measuring those 4 lengths. But after you've measured that, then you just cut it and pull this through. And we are going to close up the hole at the top here first before making those lines. So to do that, I'm going to do what's called an ultimate finish, and we just go up through the front loop only of each stitch around. And then I cinch that up tight, and it just closes that hole really nicely. Okay, so we're ready to make the lines. And in order to do this, we just sew right down through the middle of the pumpkin. So go down through the top. If you don't have a super long needle, you'll have to squish it together a little bit, which is fine. That works too. Mine is not very long, but you're gonna wanna come up right through the middle of the bottom. And you will pull it tight so it kind of pulls down and indents it there. As I said before, these 2 are going to make these front 2 lines, and then we're going to make a line straight across. It's kind of straight across right here behind the arms, and then we'll make one that's lined up with this one, so it would be like a line straight across from there, and one that's lined up with this one, so it would be like a line straight across from there. So you're keeping this tight, and this is where it's really important to have yarn that's not going to break. If it does snap, then you'll probably want to do 2 layers, or try finding a matching yarn in a different type of yarn that matches, that's not going to break. So I've got this pulled tight. I bring it up around here. I'm going to go right down through the middle again and come out the bottom again in the same spot. Every time you're just going to go down through the same spot and up through the same spot It might pull out a little of the stuffing as you go, and just pull that off. And then once you've got it here, you kind of position it where you want. Like I said, if you've got the face pointing forwards, you want a line right across the middle right here. So kind of position that where you want it before you pull it super tight. And then I'm just gonna cinch that down like that so it makes a nice indent right there, like the lines on a pumpkin. Then I'm gonna go straight across and do that on the other side. I've got a little stuffing coming out here with my sewing, that's okay. Make sure that line is positioned where you want it before pulling it nice and snug to make that line. Okay, next I'm going to divide this back half into 3 sections. I'll do a line there and a line there. And I'm kind of holding the yarn right here tight as I'm going so that it doesn't come loose as I'm sewing through this. Oh, my needle came off. That happens sometimes. But position that where you want it. And you can adjust them a little bit after they're tight. It's just harder once they're nice and snug. Okay, I've got that one. Got to thread my needle again here. And one more with this string, dividing that section in 2. Okay, and pull that one snug. They don't have to be perfect. If you look at pumpkins, they're not completely symmetrical, but if you want it to, if you need to adjust it a little bit as you go, you can. Okay, so I've got these 2 lines and these 2, and I just need to do the front lines, but I've got my yarn here. So what I'm gonna do with this piece here, I've got a lot of fuzz here, try and get that out of the way. Okay, I'm gonna go back up through the bottom so that I'm ending on the top, but I can't go through the same hole that I came out, or it will just come out. So you can go over a stitch and then go back up. So I'm coming out the top. Oh, looks like I lost it. Let's try that one more time. Go, make sure this last one is snug. Go over a stitch. And go back up through the top. Okay, usually by the time I do that, it kind of holds itself so it's not coming loose, and I can just leave that one for a minute. I'm going to move it out of the way while I work on these ones that are under the eyes. And to do these, I'm going to take the longer piece that's coming out the bottom of the eye and thread it on my needle. And I want this to go inside on between the legs here on the inside edge. So I come down here, up through the bottom again. And I'm going to take this one that comes from the top and I'm going to tie it in a knot here. The trick here is that you don't want the knot up on top. You're going to want it down here where it's kind of indented so that it will be covered by the stem. So if you start tying and it's right there, it's okay. You can just kind of take this one and go like that and it moves the knot down. So I tie a square knot, which is left over right, right over left, or vice versa. And then I need to pull that one nice and tight too, making sure that I keep it down where the stem is going to cover it. Get those so it's got that little indent there. You might need to put a finger on it to do the second half of the knot, like that. And then this is this right here is the string from the long one that I went around here for these other lines. I'm just going to take it and tie it to one of these ends so that that's secure as well and won't come loose. And then I have one more line right here. I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the first one behind the eye. Pull that up. Keep track of which one it is so you know you're going to be tying to the right one as you cinch this up. And do that same thing with the knot. Pull the first part of it tight. If it's too far out here, you just kind of take this and go like that to move the knot down into the center. Get it as tight as you want. And then do the second half of the knot. Okay, now we have those lines all the way around our pumpkin, and we're ready to make the stem and the leaf. For the stem, we're going to do a magic ring, and we will do 6 single crochets into that magic ring. And for the second round, we are going to do the back loops only. So for this, the stitch is kind of turned up to the top here, so it's kind of hard to see with this plush yarn, but this right here would be the front loop, and then this is the back loop, and we're just going to single crochet around, but we're going to do back loops only. So that will be 6 stitches again. There's 1. And I will put my stitch marker in. And again, back loop only. 2. 3. It likes to kind of try and go inside out here, so keep turning it right side out. That'll help you get in those back loops. 4. 5 and 6. Doing the back loops only kind of helps make that turn from the top of the stem to the side of the stem. So that's 6 single crochets in that round. For the next round, we're going to start with a decrease. And then we will single crochet 2. Then we'll do an increase. And we should just have 1 more stitch to finish this round. We'll just do 1 more single crochet. And doing these decreases and increases kind of helps make the stem curve that way a little bit. So we're going to repeat the same thing for the next round that we just did. So we're going to start with a decrease. Then we will single crochet 2, get under both loops there. It's kind of tiny, so it can be a little tricky, but just try and keep track of your stitches, where they go. That's 2 single crochets, then an increase, and 1 more single crochet to finish the round. And if you look at it, you can kind of tell that it's curving there a little bit like that. For round 5, we are going to do 2 single crochets and an increase, and we'll repeat that pattern. Do it 2 times. So there's 1, 2, and an increase. And then we'll do it again. 1, 2, and an increase. Now we just have 1 round left on the stem, and we are going to do a single crochet and an increase. We'll repeat that 4 times around, and we'll have a total of 12 stitches at the end of this round. Okay, to finish off this stem, I like to skip the next stitch right there, and I will slip stitch into this one. And I'm going to cut a tail, leaving a long enough tail that I can sew it onto the pumpkin. And after I've done that slip stitch, I kind of make sure that's pulled tight so it's nice and snug against the edge. I'll just pull it through and finish off. And then I've got this nice tail for sewing it on, and you can kind of tell that it curves a little bit to the right there. And we're ready to sew it on our pumpkin. This is where I feel like the bent needle comes in handy, but you can definitely do it without. I don't really stuff this stem because it's pretty tiny, and once I put the tail from the magic ring up inside there, and then I've also got this yarn here from my pumpkin that can go inside there, I don't really need any other stuffing. If your tails here are too long and they won't fit in here, then you can cut them a little bit shorter. But I just kind of pinch them together and put them inside there, and that's what I use as stuffing. Now we finished our stem with 12 stitches around, and there are 6 sections of the pumpkin, so I like to do 2 stitches in each section of the pumpkin. So what I do is it's attached to the stem here, so I will first go down through the pumpkin, catch a stitch, go down and back up like this, and then I'm just going to go like this through one of the stitches on the bottom of the stem. And since there's 12 stitches, you'll do that 12 times around. And again, we'll do 2 in each of these 6 sections of the pumpkin to sew it on. Once you have sewn all the way around, you can check and make sure you're happy with how it looks, and then go ahead and tie it off. And then you can either pull the whole yarn tail inside, or you can just pull it through to a different spot and cut it off. And there's your cute little pumpkin stem. So we're ready to make a leaf. For the leaf, we're going to start with a slip knot on our hook right here, and we will chain 5. Now we're going to go into the 3rd chain from the hook, so 1, 2, 3 right there, and right there we're going to do 2 double crochets. There's 1 and 2. In the next chain, we're going to do a half double crochet. And then in the very last chain in this chain of 5, we're just going to slip stitch. That's one side of the leaf. Then we will chain 2, 1, 2, and we're going to go back up this other side of the chain. So in the first one, we will do a slip stitch. We're just going to do the opposite pattern of what we did on the other side, so it's a mirror image. In the next one, we're going to half double crochet. And then in that last one, we're going to do 2 double crochets. There's 1 and 2. And then to get back to the start there, we will do chain 2, and we'll go back into that same place we did the 2 double crochets and do a slip stitch. And then we are just going to cut it off. You need to leave a tail for sewing on. It doesn't need to be that long of a tail because there's not a whole lot to sew here. And pull that tight and just make sure that your leaf looks symmetrical there. And before we start sewing it on, we're going to go and take this back tail and we're going to thread it down the middle here towards the bottom so that we can use it as well. So tie it to this other end when we're done so that they're both coming out towards the bottom there. Okay, now we take our pumpkin and we're ready to sew the leaf on. And I like the leaf to be on this side that's opposite from the way that the stem curves. So the stem is curving that way. I like the leaf to be over here, and you can decide where you want to place it. I kind of like it to be a little bit towards the front, not directly on the side here, but that's personal preference. Again, you can place it wherever you would like. And it just needs a couple little stitches here to secure it right next to the stem. Now when you're sewing this one on, sometimes as you get it, after you go down in there and have it secured to the stem or next to the stem, it looks like it's sticking straight up like that. And I like it to be out to the side a little bit more like that. So if that's the case, if it's sticking up like that, once you get it sewn on, once you've gotten it sewn on, then you can come and put a little stitch like right there to kind of tack it down if you need to keep it, to position it however you would like. And on this one, the way that I like to tie it off, I'm going to do a little tack stitch here so it stays down. The way that I like to tie it off is I take the one that I'm sewing with and I come out a hole just a couple stitches away here like that. And then I will take my other end. This one's already kind of short, so I'm going to start by putting my needle in. And I want to come out that exact same hole that I came out with my first one. If your tail's a little longer, you can thread it first, but mine's not. So I put the needle in first and then thread it. And I pull it out that same hole that this one came out. And then I can just tie these two together. And as you pull the knot, it kind of pulls up inside because they're coming out that same hole. Like that. I'll cut that one a little shorter to make it easier, and then you can just pull those both inside all the way to hide them. Oh, I don't want the end coming out there either. Okay, so all we have left is the mouth, and we're going to grab our little piece of the black worsted weight yarn to do that. And you can really start anywhere, but I just come up through the bottom here somewhere, and I'm going to come out in this hole right next to the eye right here. It's kind of the same line that's above the arm where it comes out here. So I come out right next to the eye there, and I'm going to go down right next to the eye on the other side, and I'm going to come up one row lower, kind of right in the middle of those two. And I will loop through, go up through that and pull it down. That's kind of what makes the smile shape. And you can work with it a little bit to get it just like you want. Sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 tries of sewing it and adjusting it until I get it just right. But if you're happy with it, then you can go ahead and tie these two together. Make sure that when you're pulling it tight, you don't pull it so tight that it messes up the smile that you just did. I'll grab a little bit smaller hook this time, and I'm going to use it to just pull that extra down inside here to hide it. And your cute little tug and pull pumpkin is all done, ready for Halloween. Thank you again for joining me today. I would love to see pictures of your creations. If you happen to post on social media, go ahead and tag me at The Stitch Sue so I can see those. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can follow along and see what my next creation is. Have a great day.